Hey, this is Patrick Coffin. Welcome to the show. This is a special edition of the broadcast in honor of the 50th birthday party of Humanae Vitae. What's Humanae Vitae? Well, it's Latin for of human life. And if you've never heard my show before, you know that I believe that contraception is at the heart of the culture war, that the culture war is really about sex. It's not so much about gun control versus, Second Amendment or big government versus small government. It's not about the role of taxes, although it is all those things. Primarily, it's a war about who we are and what we are. What kind of creature are we? Is it true that male and female, he made them, or can we make up the rules and the laws about our gender, our sex? And what about sexual relations? Who decides what's moral or immoral? Well, the Catholic Church has been faithfully transmitting the ancient Christian teaching that's rooted not only in the Bible, but in natural moral philosophy for 2,000 years. And this teaching actually predates Christianity. It's rooted in Orthodox Judaism as well. And the premise is that love belongs to life, that sex is for babies. It's for procreation. It's not just for procreation, it's also for the unity of the couples. It's also for the education of those children. So there are multiple ends. There are different goods involved in sexual intercourse and the nature of marriage as a covenant relationship between one man and one woman that's open to the adventure of parenthood till death do them part. So I was at this conference in Ontario, California, not long ago, and I got to catch up with three people that I've admired from afar. I've met them all before, either by the magic of Skype or just because we lived in the same area. They're both experts from three different angles. But before I mention who they are, I want to do a shameless plug, and I mean shameless. I'm literally going to hold the book up to the camera. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see it. It's called The Contraception, Deception, Catholic Teaching on Birth Control. It's out now. It's my updated version of a previous book called Sex au Naturel. So if you're listening on audio podcast only, you can go to patrickcoffin.net and pick up a copy. If you request it, I will sign it. So, patrickcoffin.net to pick up a copy of the book, and it's my best shot at explaining and defending the teaching of the Catholic Church with respect to contraception. Now, I just want to read. Now, normally I'm deeply allergic to reading because it's a podcast and it's meant to be enjoyed by the ear, but the audiobook is coming out, so this will also give me good practice. This is from the first chapter, How We Got Here. It's called Snapping the Stronghold. My former spiritual director, Father John McGoey, was a kindred spirit of servant of God Dorothy Day. She mentions him in her autobiography, The Long Loneliness. This Scarborough missionary of China wrote over a dozen books on family life and sexual maturity, and one of the many McGoeyisms that have stuck with me is this: there's nothing good about pleasure, it's merely enjoyable. And there's nothing bad about pain, it's merely unpleasant. Now, how many sexual and relational problems would be solved overnight if this were understood? It's a good question. McGoey, who died in 1995, I was a pallbearer at his funeral, understood well that chastity is vital to personal happiness. Chastity is to personal love, he liked to say, what budgeting is to finance. One net result of contraception has been a lowering of respect for, even the need for, the virtue of chastity. The very term, quote, making love, unquote, suggests that love can be manufactured by sex. The truth is that only life can be made. Love must be willed. Sex is no more inherently loving than a salute is inherently respectful. A soldier, for instance, may despise the officer he salutes. You can guess where this is going. Without contraception and the eclipse of chastity that it provoked, the sexual revolution would never have gotten off the ground, out of first gear. Without the ease and short-term convenience of the pill, the sexual revolution would have been a Ferrari with an empty tank. That's from Chapter 1 of the Contraception Deception, found at patrickcoffin.net. All right, so who are these guests that you're about to hear interviewed, these three different experts? One is Dr. Chris Kaiser. He's a professor of philosophy at Loyola-Marymount University in Los Angeles. He is a philosopher and just a great natural-born writer. He's done some great commentaries on Dr. Jordan B. Peterson's Bible lectures found on YouTube. And he talks about the good of children. Why are children good? And it's just sort of funny to say, but how do you argue that children are a natural good and why their coming to be should not be thwarted or undermined, which is the heart of contraception. So that's Dr. Chris Kaiser. Also, Dr. George Delgado is the medical director of Culture of Life Family Medical Services, colfs.org, COLFS, in the San Diego area. Dr. Delgado is the developer of the abortion pill reversal. So if you or someone you know, or you hear of someone who's taken the abortion pill, RU486, I forget the name, it starts with an M, Mustafa Persian, something, Mr. Mistopoulos, whatever it is. That's the technical name of the chemical concoction that kills the baby. RU486 is the former name of it. Dr. Delgado developed this thing, and it's just a fantastic grace for those who've changed their minds. You can find that at abortionpillreversal.com. Finally, Father Paul Chek is the rector of the seminary in Bridgeport, Connecticut. He's the former executive director of Courage International, the Catholic apostolate for people with same-sex attraction. Their website is couragerc.net. He also is the executive producer of a fine documentary movie called Desire of the Everlasting Hills, which I highly recommend, featuring my friend Daniel Mattson, my other friend Riley Simpson, and my other friend Paul Darrow, 3 people out of the gay lifestyle, and they tell their story in a very direct and candid way. Highly recommended. So that's Father Paul Chek. Now, what does he talk about in this interview? The connection between dissent from Humanae Vitae and the rise of the homosexual movement. You can draw a straight line, pardon the phrase, you can, the pun there, unintended, you can draw a straight line from the dissent from the norms of Humanae Vitae in 1968 to the 1973 political intimidation move that successfully removed homosexuality as a mental disorder from the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. That was done by the APA, the American Psychological Association. You can find more about that story in Robert Riley's book, Making Gay Okay, How Rationalizing Homosexuality Has Changed Everything. So Father Paul Chek has years and years of pastoral experience with homosexuals, male and female, and the psychological roots of same-sex attraction. And in this interview you're about to listen to, he draws some really fascinating connections between the teaching of the church and Scripture on what a human person is, and also the findings of sound psychology, and brings that to bear to people who've escaped the darkness of the gay lifestyle and fallen in love with chastity, and fallen in love with our Lord Jesus Christ in the process. So, Father Paul Chek, Dr. George Delgado, and Professor Chris Kaiser coming up on the Patrick Coffin Show. I hope you enjoy it. Hey, we're here at the Faithful to God's Design 50th anniversary party for Humanae Vitae here in Ontario, California, and I wanted to get some of the speakers in front of you to kind of stitch together a conversation, one guest at a time, about how to understand the prophetic, misunderstood, mostly unread encyclical Humanae Vitae, which came out 50 years ago this week. Honored to have with us in this section Dr. Chris Kaiser, Professor of Philosophy at Loyola-Marymount University in Los Angeles. Chris, good to see you again.
Nice to see you.
As always.
Yeah.
So you talked about the good of procreation.
I did.
Now, Catholics of a certain age will remember the 3 N's, right? Proles, Fides, and Sacramentum.
Right.
What's the difference between an end and a good? Are they synonyms, or is there something totally different we should?
Well, it depends on whose sort of terminology you're using. I mean, for Aquinas, goods in a way are independent of human volition, so you could have an end that in fact isn't a good. But from the agent's perspective, whatever the agent is seeking, at least appears to the agent when the agent's seeking it as good in some respect.
So by agent, you don't mean James Bond with fancy tools to kill people.
No.
The moral actor?
That's right, the moral
okay,
actor, the person doing the action, exactly, yeah. So the talk was basically suggesting that procreation is a good, and that may seem sort of self-evident to some people, but to other people it doesn't at all. So as you probably know, there's whole groups of people who think that we ought never to have children at all, the kind of zero population folks. And then there's other people that say, well, maybe have 1 kid, maybe 2, but I mean, really, you want to limit procreation, really pretty radically. And basically in the talk, what I was arguing is that procreation is in itself good. And there's different ways to explain it, but maybe the easiest intuitively to understand would be something like this. We probably all agree that gold is a valuable thing. And if that's true, then a gold mine is valuable. we'd agree that cash is valuable. And if that's true, then a lucrative career, to be a doctor, to be a lawyer, is a valuable thing. Mm-hmm. So if it's true that you and I and every other human being has intrinsic value and dignity, then what gives rise to us also is a valuable thing. And so what gives rise to us is procreation.
So if human life is in some way sacred, then the means of transmission of that life is also in some way sacred. So it's not this morally neutral exchange going from one generation to another.
Exactly.
It's that, and isn't that the heart of Humanae Vitae?
It is.
The transmission of life. It's at the heart of it. So it's not about making women into Catholic baby machines where the goal is to maximally have as many biologically possible children.
Yeah, no, I had a professor one time who said that, well, the Catholic teaching of birth control is just so there can be as many Catholics as possible. And I said, well, that's very interesting. Well, can you explain to me then why there are celibate priests? Because
right.
They would have, kids, and celibate nuns. And why the church is against polygamy, which would be much more effective in terms of reproducing than other things. And why the church is against sex outside of marriage, which also would be helpful in reproducing as much as possible. So, this view that the church is teaching is like, just as many people as humanly possible is obviously, for anyone who thinks about it,
right.
completely fallacious.
And doesn't that fallacy feed into one of the engines driving dissent toward Humanae Vitae is the overpopulation myth?
Yeah, that's another thing that I think people are beginning to recognize that it is a myth. I mean, the last couple of years, the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal both run very prominent stories about the population bomb myth, basically. That there are all these predictions that were made in the late 60s and 70s about we're going to run out of food, there's going to be unbelievable poverty. All that is completely false. In fact, the reverse has happened. So if you look at the rate of people that are extremely poor, and I'll define extremely poor as not having enough food every day, right? Like really poor. That rate has gone down over the last 50 years. So it used to be, 3 centuries ago, almost all people on planet Earth, 99%, were extremely poor. Now, it's about 8% of the human population is extremely poor. And basically, if you look at the trend lines, it's going down, down, down. By the year 2030 something or other, it's going to be no one on Earth is going to be extremely poor. I mean, it'll be statistically irrelevant.
Is that because of human ingenuity and dealing with problems of oligarchic, corrupt governments that siphon food and resources from first world countries? Is that part of it?
Yeah. So
and other human ingenuities?
Yeah. The biggest driver of this successful eradication of poverty is human ingenuity. So, for instance, we now can produce much more food on a much smaller amount of land using much less human labor than before. So think about 300 years ago. We'd have to be out in the field, literally getting the food and picking everything, and now for many kinds of crops, you have a machine that goes out there and it gets
you go to Costco
going.
In the frozen food aisle.
Exactly. Yeah. And so we really now, as in general, the human population is doing incredibly well. And even though the population is much larger than it was 200 years ago, again, the percentage of people that are very poor is collapsing. It's going down, as fast as you wouldn't believe how fast it's going down. It's really quite amazing.
You just don't read that. And now you're saying the New York Times and Wall Street Journal are kind of shedding light on the data that suggests the population explosion frenzy is mythological. I don't know how well that or how consistently that is floated down or trickled down to the Catholic, even the Catholic pews, because most people, it's just been we've been so propagandized by Paul Ehrlich and his ilk. That's
right. But Paul Ehrlich made many predictions. He was the famous Stanford professor, as you know, and other people may know, that predicted that, in the next, he wrote a book in the late 60s predicting
the same
next
year,
30, 40 years.
1968,
exactly. And he had these very concrete predictions, like, the 1/3 of the world's going to starve to death, et cetera, et cetera. Literally, none of that has happened. In fact, the exact reverse of all those things.
He's like the anti-Pope Paul VI.
Exactly, yeah.
Prediction-wise.
And totally wrong. I mean, in other words, empirically wrong. It's not a matter of faith or revelation or Catholic, Protestant. It's just a fact that there's more food, more people getting fed, more eradication of disease, longer lifespans, really on every measure, right? Human beings are that's not quite true. I shouldn't say on every measure, because there's some things that have gotten worse. But in terms of food, it is substantially better than it's ever been on planet Earth. I mean, you and I both live with greater comfort than any king did in the Middle Ages, right? We've got
that's weird to think that. Yeah, that's right.
Dental care, Novocaine, eyeglasses,
single malt Scotch,
penicillin. Exactly. No, it's really true though.
Yeah.
It's hard to wrap your mind around, but really, I would rather have my life than the life of Pharaoh.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah. So, how many slaves do you have?
No slaves, but air conditioning. So this is definitely...
Yeah, there's a pro-con. I'm going to go with the AC. Getting back to the idea of the procreation good, the new coming to be of a person as a good.
Yeah.
How much do you think the sexual revolution has removed the good and either made it a blank or a bad? Because I love to look at old magazines, and I'm a kind of aficionado of classic television and movies. And tomorrow in my talk, I'm going to be talking about, as two bookends, the 1950 version of the film, Cheaper by the Dozen, and the 2003 remake with Steve Martin. Same story, very, very different takes on what it means to have a lot of kids.
Right.
It seems that if you look at advertisements in those magazines for, let's say, a car or a vacuum cleaner, 4, 5, and 6 kids was normal depiction of an American family. Now, you might have one, because kids are cute, I guess, for the photo up.
Yeah.
So how much has the drive to accept contraception to get away with the sexual activity minus the kids? I mean, the idea of procreation as good is almost like, what?
No, I think that's right. And so I was talking a moment ago about how things have gotten better and better, and I corrected myself and said, well, not in every way. And that's one way it definitely has not gotten better. So for instance, I would say that prior generations had a much greater tolerance for suffering and a greater willingness to sacrifice for a noble ideal. So think about all the people that went to World War II. I mean, they have to know. You're storming the beaches of Normandy, and this is like ultra dangerous. You may get killed. You may get injured permanently.
Yeah.
I mean, this was an enormous sacrifice.
Worse than a coin flip.
Yeah. I mean, this is heavy duty, and I think now, not everyone, of course, but many people shy away from that, and so they think of the goal of life. Too many people, as seeking pleasure, and there's many troubles with that. The biggest trouble is, even if you got that, it actually doesn't work very well for actual sustainable happiness. And there's lots of evidence from the psychological literature, and we don't have to appeal to that. I mean, just think about celebrities. I mean, celebrities have all the booze they can drink, all the drugs they can take, all the sexual partners they can handle. They got fame, they got money, and then how many of these people who have everything you think would make you happy end up being miserable and even killing themselves?
Right.
So it seems to me that celebrities are absolutely undeniable evidence that those things don't work, even in mega doses, right? Because celebrities have more of those kinds of things than anybody else, right? Fame and money and all that, and yet it doesn't work. So I think part of the church's wisdom is to say that children contribute very greatly to their parents' flourishing. Children, the church teaches, are the supreme gift of marriage. And I think part of the reason for that is that even though children are, of course, difficult, you're a father, I'm a father, any mother or father can tell you that, they also bring deep meaning. And really, human beings, as our friend Jordan Peterson would say, need meaning to really live a flourishing life. And children give that in spades. There's other ways to get it too. Obviously many priests have it, nuns can have it. It's not just parents who have it. But the normal, typical way people find deep meaning is through their own children. And so if you cut that off, not only are you not contributing to the next generation in a literal sense, but you are really handicapping yourself from finding the deepest kind of happiness possible. And this was even Hugh Hefner saw this. When he died, I read an interview with him, and it said that after he got married, I forget if it was the second or third time, he said, there are the kids in his house, and the interviewer said he was tearing up, saying, I was looking for love for so long, and now I finally found it in these kids.
Yeah.
That's Hugh Hefner even recognizes that.
Yeah.
So if even he can recognize it, wow.
Hefner is a great, I want to say character study, but he's definitely a very interesting psychological profile. His first wife left him after World War II, and some commentators believe that the founding of Playboy in 1953 was revenge porn against her. I'll get her back. I'll do these salacious little magazine and so on.
Yeah.
And of course,
I think it's interesting because the saints are a great model of what to do. But I think sometimes celebrities can be a model of what not to do. In other words,
Right.
you can see in these people that take it to the extreme what happens when you take it to the extreme, right? The celebrities.
Yeah, you get to the Me Too movement.
Yeah, they
or
get
suicides.
and alone, miserable. Me Too. I mean, just really, their lives blow up. And then the great saints, yes, they suffer, but again, as quote Jordan Peterson again, that's inevitable. I mean, there's no getting out of suffering.
Death, taxes, suffering.
Yeah, exactly. That's just part of the human condition. So the question is, if we embrace it, if we try to live out of love despite the inevitable suffering, that's going to leave us and everyone that we care about in a much better situation than retreating into just trying to get kicks and pleasure.
Right. And is that a way to understand the paradox of finding meaning through suffering? You take suffering out of the equation. A lot of atheists, as I know you know, they'll say, well, how can a good God, allow suffering?
Yeah.
But wait a second. If you have a life of no suffering, say the life of a celebrity who's pampered, entourage, taken care of, bulletproof limousines, the best cuisine imaginable, and they have no apparent suffering, not like the poor do, that's a greater recipe for meaninglessness. It seems to me that children, while good, also bring a certain shadow of the cross. You realize, hey, it's not really about me. It's 4 a.m., the alarm goes off, the alarm being a child crying, as you say.
Right.
But that, I guess, participation in the cross of giving yourself over to someone else causes the most you can't even put how happy you are to be of service to your child.
No, I think that's totally right. And again, I don't think it's some unusual experience. I mean, talk to almost any parent. Even think of, the President of the United States said this once, the former president, that he considered the most important thing in his life were his kids. They're more important than being president. And the thing is, I don't think that's unique to him as just one person. I think this is, you asked me, I love being a professor. I mean love, capital L-O-V-E.
Not L-U-V.
Not L-U, exactly. But if you said to me, okay, here's your choice. Your career is destroyed. You lose your job. You'll never be a professor again. I would be devastated. That'd be awful.
Yeah.
But if the choice were that or your kids all die, I would choose to have my profession destroyed rather
even
than
for guaranteed tenure.
Even for I have guaranteed it, but even no. But and then again, I think almost everyone would think that, right? I mean, again, other than complete crazy people.
Yeah,
so the kind of meaning and love that are found in children is very significant.
I have goons, and I'm willing to send them out to make sure that you come back on the show.
All right.
Deal? All right, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Chris Kaiser.
Thank you.
All right, this is the Patrick Hoffman Show. Coming up next, our next guest. Don't go away. Continuing our stitched together conversations with guest speakers at the Humanae Vitae 50th Anniversary Conference here in Ontario, California. We have the Medical Director of Culture of Life Family Services and the founder of a new venture I can't wait to ask him about. It's called the Steno Institute. Dr. George Delgado, good to see you again.
Great to be here, Patrick.
I think you and I have interviewed the highest number of times before infinity on another radio show, who shall remain nameless.
I think so.
The Cancer's Live.
Now it's great to be audio and video.
Audio and video. So the first thing you said to me after hello, you told me about the Steno Institute, and I've been reviewing it. What's what we call in Hollywood the elevator pitch? If you have 30 seconds to tell Steven Spielberg, because you want to make a movie about it, what's the mission and why is there a need?
The mission is to further the research into abortion pill reversal, because we need to make sure that we further the research, perfect the protocols so that more women are aware of this, and so we can give the absolute best care to women who want a second chance at choice. From there, once we perfect that, we're going to expand into other areas of pro-life research that are sorely needed, because there are plenty of great research institutes that look at the sociological and the policy parts of it.
Right.
We want to provide the missing piece of the puzzle, which is the medical and the psychological aspects.
So this sounds like the next booster rocket to your developing the abortion pill reversal. I mean, you were one of the main drivers behind this second chance, really, for women who took the, is it the RU-486? Is it
RU-486 is the old name. It's now known by mifepristone.
Mifepristone.
And yes, I founded Abortion Pill Reversal, and that grew as an international movement, and it got so big that we actually handed it off to Heartbeat International with everything except for the research part. That stayed with me, of course. And now the Steno Institute is going to be a platform to develop that research.
Abortionpillreversal.com, still the website?
It is.
That's a golden website there, folks. So if you or someone you know has taken the mifepristone, formerly known as RU-486 abortion pill, there is a window that you have. How long is that window generally?
We've studied women up to 72 hours after the ingestion of mifepristone and had success.
And how many countries can they access that website and possibly get access to the abortion pill reversal?
Theoretically, they could access it in any country in the world. We do have now, we've spawned a separate network in Australia. They have one in Australia. And a Russian doctor actually translated the website and now is doing that in Russia.
Wow, okay. Well, this is a natural outgrowth. Steno, tell us about Blessed Nicholas Steno.
So Blessed Nicholas Steno was a very well-rounded man in Denmark in the 17th century. And he started out as a scientist. He was a geologist, a paleontologist. If you do a Google search on him, you'll find articles at the University of California, Berkeley about his geological discoveries. He also was an anatomist and a physician. All of us carry his name because the little duct in your cheek that carries saliva to the side of your cheek is called duct of Steno.
I knew that.
Then he didn't just stop there. He became more interested in theology. He converted to Catholicism and eventually became a bishop. And later on, Pope Paul VI, I believe, named him a blessed.
Paul VI did. Well, that's fitting.
Fitting for us, yes.
Fitting for us. Tell us about, from your point of view as a physician, how the introduction of the contraceptive mentality and the desire to have sexual relations without the natural consequences, how the pill led to things like another pill that doesn't stop the conception of a baby before it happens, but kills the baby after it happens. Because to me, the pill the abortion pill is a strong overlap of the contraceptive mentality and the abortion mentality.
It is absolutely right. In fact, Pope John Paul II said that contraception and abortion are fruits of the same tree. And it only makes sense that if you govern your lives based on having effective contraception and that in your mind you think there's no possibility of conception, that if that contraception fails, you need to have a plan B. And the plan B, of course, is abortion. And nowadays, 30 to 40% of all abortions in the United States are mifepristone abortions.
Really?
In some countries like Scotland, it's 75%.
That's amazing.
So there's a lot of need there for help to help these women.
Does that also feed into the euphemization of abortion? I mean, you're simply taking a pill as you would for a headache. It's not like you have to lie down and lift your heels and have some, invasive thing where it's obviously, it's a baby shape. If you look at any ultrasound image, at some point in gestation, it looks very human. This pill-taking thing seems very hard to overcome from a psychological point of view.
Somewhat,
to get to the reality of what's happening.
Right, and in fact, the abortion proponents, they touted this as, quote, the Holy Grail, because they thought that this would fully liberate women by taking the abortion procedure out of a doctor's office and put it into the privacy of a woman's own home, where she would not have to rely so much on a doctor. But really what's happened there, instead of at least having a person next to her during the abortion, she aborts her baby in her own bathroom, totally forlorn. And you can see that it's just more of the evil of abortion.
If she's lucky, the man who got her in that condition will be there to support her.
If she's lucky. Yeah, but
if he's even
chance.
In the picture.
Right. Usually they've abandoned them far before that.
How dangerous is the abortion pill?
Some of the studies have shown that it's actually more dangerous than the surgical abortion, because the women are at home, more chance of bleeding, maybe more chance of infection, and then if it fails, they then have to undergo the surgical abortion. Now, for them, this holy grail was to take it out of the clinic, but for us on the pro-life side and for women who do change their minds, it's actually a blessing in disguise, because with a surgical abortion, once the instrument enters the uterus, it's over. There's no turning back. But with this, if they've taken the first drug, mifepristone, they change their mind, they do have a window where they can reverse course. And so for us, it's a great blessing, and for these women too.
So it's a holy grail, but not in the way that its inventors intended.
Exactly, a real holy grail.
Providential note there. You mentioned in privacy. I'm very interested in the legal side of the story, where the justices of the Supreme Court in 1965 in Griswold versus Connecticut discovered something. They were discovered this magical land of the penumbra, which is the word they use to describe the right to privacy in the Constitution, in the Bill of Rights. Of course, it's not there in the letter, but they found it in the spirit.
Some would say it's an invention, not a discovery.
Well, if something's not there and you say it is there, it's either a magic trick or it's an invention. But it goes to the cover that Roe v. Wade used to hide the fact that they lied about Norma McCorvey, that Norma McCorvey was not raped. She never had an abortion. And yet that right to privacy appeal is drawn directly from a case involving contraception?
Exactly, yeah. So the Griswold case was the case, and there was a previous case before that one, actually, that only involved married couples. And so the justices took that, and that just shows, again, the strong contraception-abortion connection that is very real, and it manifests itself many times over.
How open is the average doctor? Let's take faith out of it. The average physician who was trained in your run-of-the-mill medical school, how open are they to the research that you're going to uncover and have uncovered already at the Stanton Institute?
Yeah.
Is there a strong bias against it? They just don't want to hear it because they're so wedded to the agenda, or what?
For most physicians, they still haven't heard of it yet, so it's a lot of ignorance. For others, there's a strong bias because they follow the dictates of the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, which is the big OBGYN professional group that has come out against us strong with both barrels firing. It's like David against Goliath. So they've been very much against us. So doctors who tend to follow what they say, because they trust them, they tend to be against us.
Just the rumor mill.
Exactly.
And name calling?
Oh, lots of name calling for sure. And I think what they fear is that...
Oh, that must hurt you inside.
Yes, they're not playing nice. And I think what they feel is that if we substantiate that abortion pill is reversible, that you can stop a medical abortion, then that then gives credence to the idea that women actually do change their minds and have reservations and second thoughts about the abortion.
Sure.
And therefore, that suggests that abortion is not the great good that everyone says it is. So I think they see that sequence of ideas and consequences, and that's why they are so against us.
We talked a little bit before we went on the air today about the obvious financial investment that the pharmaceutical companies have. Are the pharmaceutical companies and the people who train doctors, are they wedded in some way? Is there an alliance of at least a purpose?
There is. I call it the medical abortion contraceptive complex. And sure, so all these huge companies, Johnson & Johnson is one of them, they make all these contraceptives. They are very much wedded into making contraception be a big part of everybody's life. And they've been a big part of exporting it to third world countries, along with people like the Gates Foundation. So they are very much invested in this, and they would greatly suffer if there was a decrease in their market share.
In your clinical practice, do you speak with couples who drop contraception and adopt natural family planning? And if so, what's their testimony usually?
I do. So there are very different testimonies. Some are people who are relatively secular, and the woman says that she no longer wants to take chemicals to alter her body because she sees that she has this gut feeling that it's not right to take chemicals, that you want to live more naturally. And then we have those who have discovered more the natural law of how things should work, and they feel that an impediment to their fertility is not a good thing. And then the third group are those who are religious and who see that finally the light goes on, and they acknowledge the divine revelation that God created us male and female with beautiful reproductive systems that are complementary, and that we should follow God's design for reproduction.
One of the claims that people make who are in favor of contraception is that they're really the same. And when you invite them to try a natural family planning, they don't want to, because there's some deep intuition. They're not the same. One involves self-control, and one is birth control. You can keep throwing a pill at a problem, and you keep ignoring deeper conflicts in the relationship. It's easier to facilitate them. I should say it's easier to ignore them if you're contracepting, because then you don't have to have that vital conversation each month about fertility and your future together, and so on. How much of this transgender confusion that's arisen so quickly and has become so embedded in our cultural narrative, how much do you think that confusion stems from confusion regarding the meaning of love, sex, and marriage that Paul VI taught?
Well, I think, again, they're fruits of the same tree, because as soon as you accept that you can have sex that's sterile, that separates the procreative from the unitive, then almost anything goes. And that opens the door to homosexual relations, because then obviously there's no procreative aspect there.
Yeah.
And then that also then allows one to question, well, how important is gender? If it's not sort of a given that sex is both procreative and unitive, then maybe it's not set that the genders are a gift from God, and that they are what they are and should stay what they are. And if we can make choices about whether or not we're going to be fertile or going to procreate, why can't we make choices about how we're going to be sexually?
I'm going to talk about that today in my talk, the final talk, because once that fundamental separation is permitted, separating love from life, really all bets are off. The logic is inexorable. And I've pondered a little bit about what the end game is, like where's it all headed? And I think it's headed toward the normalization of necrophilia. Because the introduction of the death principle in contraception has led so far in that direction. And the latest step toward that terrible journey is the rise of sex robots. Well, what's a robot? It's a realistic looking corpse. It doesn't matter if it can squawk like a Joey Stivic doll or a toy.
Not to mention opening the door to bestiality, and that'll be here too.
The Supreme Court of Canada, my home and native land, redefined bestiality last year.
Yeah. And I would posit also that it actually wasn't just the acceptance of contraception. I would go way back to the Reformation, and no offense to our Protestant brothers and sisters, but unintended consequences. When Luther separated marriage from the sacramental life, that there, to put it in the hands of the state, there you took marriage, which is a sacred bond between man and woman, out of the realm of God. And it was now a device of man. And it was a device of man. He can do it whatever he wants with it. And I think that then allowed many hundreds of years later for the contraceptive mentality.
So colfs.org?
Colfs.org, colfs.org.
colfs.org. And when the Steno Institute gets its website launched, we'll throw traffic that way as well. It's STENO, and I can't wait to hear more about it.
Super.
All right, great to talk to you again, Dr.
Great being here.
All right.
God bless you.
God bless you. Coming up next, more from the Faithful to God's Design Humanae Vitae 50th birthday party here in Southern California. Up next, another guest. Stay tuned. Here with my good friend, Father Paul Chek, former National Director of Courage International, and now the Rector of the Seminary for the Diocese of Bridgeport, Connecticut, St. John Fisher. Father Chek.
Good to see you, Patrick.
You as well. Good to see you.
Thank you for the invitation.
If you keep, knocking it out of the park with your high quality teaching, you're gonna end up with a hat that you might not want on your head.
No funny hats. I'm very happy where I am. Thank you.
Wonderful. How's it going?
It's good. It's great. It's I like to say, especially after 9 years of traveling for Courage, that I'm happy to be a stay-at-home dad.
Oh, that's
so. That's my work, right? Spiritual father.
Fantastic. And today at this conference, you're talking about the connection between, as one of the fallouts of Descent from Humanae Vitae, the rise of the homosexualist movement.
We're going to talk. Yeah, sure. I want to address the connection between the two, because once we decide that marriage is improved by deliberately separating sex from babies, then it's a short step to what we have now. It doesn't improve it, but many people think so. But once we make that deliberate separation or attempt to in marriage, then the next step is taking sex out of marriage, and then the next step is removing sex from any kind of recognizable design per Genesis 1:27.
Right.
So the two are definitely linked.
One of the ironies that I discovered in dealing with this on Catholic Answers Live when I was at that show, you may have heard of the organization.
I've heard of it.
His brother, Chris, is the president, my ex-boss of happy memory.
Former boss.
Former ex-boss. I think I said ex-boss. Freudian slip. The irony is when you deal with gay activists who call the show, and I know you've had this experience, when you ask them to define marriage, their definition invariably excludes
the
sexual. They don't use the S word at all.
Right.
It's love, it's commitment, it's an emotional bonding. It's till death do you part.
Right.
Well, wait a second. Our definition, the traditional Christian definition, which I suppose predates Christianity, is that sex is an essential ingredient.
Well, of course, because our mission is to populate this world and the world to come. And the inherent connection between sex and babies is clear enough when we look at the body.
Right.
The male and female.
Eyes are for seeing, ears are for hearing, stomachs for food.
Right.
Organs of generation are for that.
And so they only make sense, the male procreative organs and the female procreative organs only make sense in light of their complements. Otherwise, we don't understand their form and function. So that makes it unique from the eyes and everything else that you mentioned. So there's that. And of course, if a new life is going to come to the world, it takes an egg and a sperm, which means a woman and a man for now. Please God, we never get to cloning. And that also tells us something about the unique character of this aspect of the human endeavor.
So for procreation to happen, you need half of the species have to collaborate so that the two literally become one.
Yes, either in the way that God intends and nature intends, or in vitro in the petri dish, which of course is not what nature intends.
Right.
But without those two components, there's no new life.
The Stonewall riots were 1969 in New York City.
Right, that's right.
And that was a year after Humanae Vitae was released and rejected widely.
Yeah.
There's something providential about that timing. In my talk this afternoon, I'm going to be talking about the fact that the 60s really began in 1965, when the Second Vatican Council ended. A lot of things tilted after that. In 1969, you also had the first rated X movie win the Best Picture Oscar, Midnight Cowboy.
Yeah, right.
But would you say, Father Chuck, that as dissent against the norms of Humanae Vitae became more entrenched, the idea of same-sex attraction became more and more viable? Where before then, of course, there's been sin since Adam was wearing pants. But
no, I think that I would, not to disagree with my host, but I would locate the problem even further back.
How far back?
Well, maybe to the end of the 19th century. I mean, I think the termites were in the wood for a long time, and I would distinguish continence from chastity, right? So continence means no genital activity, but we don't know the motive. And I think before we had chemical contraception, a lot of the motive was, we don't want a child out of wedlock, or I don't want a sexually transmitted disease, or I don't want to be bound to you. So there were external restraints. Those fell when a reliable, easily accessible form of contraception became available.
Are you talking about like vulcanized rubber and the condom?
No. I'm talking about the birth control pill.
Oh, I see.
And so as a result of that, things came unwound very quickly. So I don't know how much authentic chastity we actually had prior to 68 or prior to 1960 when the pill is widely available. I think we had more continence. Do you see what I'm saying?
Right, abstinence from that behavior, because there were layers of taboo you would have to break to engage in sex outside marriage.
Right, so there was fear.
Yeah.
And fear is not a motivator for virtue. There could be a piece of it, but so I would say that, and divorce too, which was prior to 68, or the only major way in which civil society stood contrary to the church on the Sixth Commandment, right? And divorce paves the way for homosexuality also from the standpoint that if two people can define marriage or when it ends according to their subjective condition, then why can't two other people define marriage the way they want?
Now we say, or three.
Yeah, exactly.
There are polyamorous couples that want thruples and so on.
Right.
And I believe it was then Governor Ronald Reagan who gave us the 1969 no-fault divorce law in California, which he regretted.
Yes. That has done us harm. There isn't any question. So that convergence of factors has brought us to today, and I think we have a lot of Catholics who go to Mass on Sunday who are disposed, at least sentimentally, towards same-sex marriage. And the philosophical logic that underpins that, even if they haven't thought of it this way, has everything to do with divorce and contraception. Yeah.
Is holding that homosexual behavior and the redefinition of marriage as a good thing, should that bar someone from receiving Holy Communion, in your view?
Well, that's a very good question. If they're public about it, if they hold
and I don't mean someone stopping them, an extraordinary minister of Holy Communion or the ordinary minister, but from their own discernment point of view. Yeah,
that's a public dissent that in a former time Catholics would have understood was not something that brought them in good standing, because it's a major point. I think post Humanae Vitae, and the controversy around it and follow your conscience. We now have people who consider themselves Catholics in good standing that in a former time would have understood, no, I can't approach the altar. So
I
think it's believable.
Forming a bad conscience, or at least you're badly formed conscience.
Sadly, indeed.
So you were locating the rise of I'm going to call it homosexualism. Before 1969, obviously there was foment and there was subsurface activity and so on. You always had an area of town, I suppose. You look at England at turn of the previous. We can't say turn of the century anymore. Turn of the previous century. Exactly, right. You had the aesthete movement and people like Oscar Wilde. They would use words like flamboyant, but everybody kind of knew what they were talking about. But then it was all the love that dare not say its name. Now it's the love that can't shut up about itself.
It's very prominent. But I think, although there's only one orientation, man to woman, woman to man, and everything else is a deviation from it, I think those who are inclined, let's say, just heterosexually, bear some of the responsibility for creating the conditions that you've described that we have today.
In other words, widespread failure of marriage longevity, and happiness.
And the widespread use of the pill and other forms of contraception. So I don't, part of my way of understanding this is one tapestry and one virtue, chastity, and it can be violated clearly in a number of ways. But I wouldn't lay all the problem on one segment of the population.
Sure. Right. Yeah. Fair enough. How different is your priesthood now running a rectory of a seminary?
Yeah.
Because you're dealing with young men. Some of them
Yeah.
are wounded. Some of
Sure.
them need fathering.
Yes.
Because
right.
the lack of the father is all tied to the marriage failure piece.
It is, yeah, and that affects the good men. Well, I think certainly one thing that's in common is my former work was very countercultural.
Yeah, no kidding.
And I think for a man to come into the seminary today is a very strong countercultural statement.
Yeah,
so those
that's
two
true.
things go together.
Yeah.
And I'm living spiritual fatherhood again in a different way, and happy for that. So I loved my former work. I love my current assignment. I'm a very happy priest.
Well, if I can end with a note of just shameless compliment, your brand, Father Czech, is to get all of the principles across in a way that's just unremittingly kind and charitable.
Well,
You're just such a sweethearted
I'm
guy.
just trying. I don't know about that. But I'm trying to follow the high priest, and he certainly laid out the example for us in that way. So, may God be praised.
Yep. Amen.
Good.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Patrick.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great to see you again,
Catch
and
your
all the
talk.
best in your good work.
Great. Thank you so much.
Peace and all good.
All right, coming up next, more on the fallout from Descent of Humanae Vitae, and more to the point, the truth, beauty, and goodness of the 1968 encyclical.